What do you think are the traits of a high value man?
Ooh, such a good question. I talk about this a little bit in the book. I think the first thing of a high value man is they can't be a liability to the people around them. You have to be an asset to be high value, right? And so, where do men become liabilities? Well, if your family and friends can't count on you financially, spiritually, right, relationally, physically, then you can't be an asset to the people in your life. And so I think when people feel more confident because they have you in their corner, when people know they can count on you, when they know that they have you as a friend, I think it's just like gives you like a pillar, right? Like somebody that's just kind of there. I like to compare it to like a chessboard, right? And a lot of men, I had a kind of like a little in a meditation. This came to me one time where because I've been single for a long time, dating somebody right now. But think about like a chessboard and the king, who would be, the man in this example. The whole point is to keep himself alive, right? And it's very difficult to stay alive as the king if you don't have a queen on the board with you. So the only way to do that otherwise is you have to have a lot of other high value pieces. So who in your life are your castles, right? Who are your knights? Who are your bishops? Who are the spiritual people in your life? Who are the adventurous people? Who are the grounded people? And then who are the people that maybe that you get to teach or that look up to you or maybe that you get to mentor, and those would be your pawns and stuff. And I just had this really cool vision of that. And it's like I was able to look at a different friend from each aspect of my life that covered one of those pieces, and they're all value in different ways. They help you in different ways to keep you basically moving forward and keep you alive. And so I love that example because I think it kind of just emphasizes, you have to be an asset. You have to be able to help the people in your world. And that to me is a high value man.
I love how you frame that you didn't like focus on like money, cars, house, vacations and stuff. Cause I think that gets lost a lot now with the term high value man. I think people hear that and they're like, oh, does that mean value as in money, as in cars? I have to drive like a Lamborghini? Do I have to like have a $10 million home in a big city or whatever? What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions?
Yeah, there's a there's a video going around right now. You've probably seen it. It's Wes Watson, who's very famous for, he says that like to him, they actually asked him on the Fresh and Fit podcast, they said, what is a high value man? And he said, if you're not rich, ripped, and rare, are the three, that's his kind of whole mantra and stuff. But he named those three things. He said, then you're not a high value man. And it's like, well, and then there's another guy that he's like, I actually think having a family and, a wife that loves you, that you love, and, a relationship with Jesus and ultimately, certain things are very fleeting. And I think that society does misinterpret a lot right now as far as what value is. Chris Williamson said this on our podcast. He said the problem right now is that people have mistaken what's loud or what gets attention with what's valuable. And so people on the internet are desperately trying to be noticed because there's so much noise. It's so much more difficult than ever to get noticed or to just get any traction. And so people are doing things to get noticed that maybe have a lot of attention, but it doesn't mean they're valuable. It doesn't mean that they're good things. And so I think the big temptation right now is people are trying to show value through things that really don't have any value. And until you've had those things, I think it's hard to understand just how non-valuable those things are. Like I had the big house, by 25, 26 years old, I had one of the biggest houses in town with the pool and six roommates, and it was the party house and everything else. Dude, I hated it. It was like I was the only one eating money every month on the mortgage. My roommates were getting the deal of the century on the rent. Like it was just a hassle. We were, it doesn't add anything to your life. It adds stress pretty much more than anything. And I mean, ultimately, do you wake up and enjoy who you are? Like when you wake up, are you like excited about your life? Are you excited? But like honestly, and I think a lot of people pretend they are. A lot of people show online they are, but do you genuinely enjoy being you? Do people like having you around? Are people excited when you show up? Do little kids run up to you when they see you? Those are the questions I think that are worth asking yourself. And if you can answer yes, if you wake up and enjoy being who you are, then I think you're on the right path. I think that you're trying your best. And even if you're not, like, are you doing things that are you making investments in your future? Right. I think what's easy to do is to look at what's happening right now. And I think where men get screwed up and society in general gets in trouble is when we focus on what feels good in the moment instead of what's good for us long term. Now I say like it's this little joke of the universe. It's like whatever's good for us long term usually hurts in the moment. And what feels good in the moment is usually bad for us long term, right? And so we have to be willing to have a little bit of vision and foresight. It's one of the first things I have the men in my coaching program do is really build a vision of what they want their life to look like. Because if not, it's very easy to fall for the temptation in the moment. You get that call and your buddy wants to go out, hit the bar, whatever it might be, or you're just tempted to feel good in the moment and instead of looking at the long-term results. And so, certain things that should have more value they become sacrificed what we want most for what we want in the moment.
Yeah, and a lot of times we're chasing these things out of insecurity. Like I remember as a kid, I was unathletic. I never got attention from the pretty girls. I never like I was always doing what I could to fit in with other kids. I thought that I was a complete failure based on the way I was living my life as a kid. So I thought that as a man, in order to be successful and happy, I needed to find a way to get attention from the pretty girls somehow, to be ripped, to be athletic, to be successful. And so I ended up after I got out of jail when in my early 20s, I pursued that like hard for years. I pursued getting ripped, which I did. I pursued building a successful career, which I did. I pursued, getting attention from pretty women. And what I found was I was even more like miserable, I think kind of like how you described than I was previously because I thought that I had been sold this bill of goods. Like I thought that I had been lied to and that once I achieved this thing, got to the top of the mountain where I had all these things that I thought would give me eternal happiness, that my problems would go away. And what happened, Jimmy, and based on your backstory, you may relate to this. Like it just made everything worse because now I had realized that I had skipped like the most fundamental part of all this, which was like working on myself and learning how to like love myself for who I am. So I'll let you kind of take it from there.
Yeah, it's yeah, and dude, that's every one of us has had that experience on some level, right? Like when we were in high school, the senior that had the nice car got the girl we wanted. So to us, value started becoming having a nice car or being ripped because the guy was on the football team or whatever it might have been. And so, unfortunately, our little kid inside of us that is a little bit insecure, got hurt or wounded in that time, is screaming out that this is what's going to solve that. And you get to the top of the mountain financially, or maybe you get to a point where are, looked at as somebody that's very physically fit or physically attractive. But if you haven't done the internal work, you get in a bad spot because when you're poor, at least you can think to yourself, well, I'm miserable because I don't have any money. But if I had money, then I'd be happy. And then you get money and you're still miserable. You're probably more miserable because money just amplifies wherever you're already at. And then you're in a really bad spot, right? Then you really don't have anything to kind of look forward to. And so, yeah, man, happiness is an internal game. I had a wonderful coach 10, 12 years ago that started teaching me. He said, look, we all have specific sets of needs that we need to get met. Like we just do. We're going to have these need structures. We're going to have things that we're going to need in order to be fulfilled. He said there's two ways to go about getting them, externally or internally. And the problem is externally, it's just fleeting. Like anytime you get, I mean, how many of us bought a new car and within a week, sometimes a day, it's just a car in the garage. You're already like, why did I buy this thing? But you bought it because you were trying to feel an emotion. You were trying to get validated in some way. But when you do the work on the inside, the best part about doing that is you don't really care what happens. Like when you know who you are, like you can have the whole world against you, but if you truly know who you are, you're in integrity, you're doing it the right way, you'll be fine. But the second that you're out of integrity or you're doing things that maybe you shouldn't be doing or you're doing things for the wrong reasons, then when somebody calls you out on it, you're going to get really defensive because you realize that there's some truth in that and it's going to hurt. And so I think the best thing to do is really figure out, how do I go internally to be able to find self-love? And, one of the questions that I love to propose to the guys that I coach again is I say, look, self love isn't necessarily just like, massages and bubble baths or whatever, a lot of people like do it or whatever, but like ask yourself questions like, what do you truly love doing? Like, what's something that you absolutely love to do that you haven't made time for in a really long time? That's one of the questions I love to propose because even just asking that one question, you start to go, oh, like, I love to go hiking. When was the last time you went hiking? Gosh, it was last spring. Or like, I love to go skiing. I was like, oh, did you make it up this year? No, I didn't. Like, I love to go golfing. Oh, when's the last time you got out? I don't even know where my clubs are, And so people, I think, like just being able to take care of ourselves and being able to put our needs and understand that it's not selfish to take care of ourselves so that we can show up for everybody else. But you have to be able to do those things from within. You have to find that happiness from within because the second you need to be validated, and you see this all the time on social media, and guilty as charged. Like I've absolutely fallen into this trap before, but you're posting things to be validated. You want to show people that you're enough, and I mean, I can tell a little bit of my story. I was when I was a little kid, I was 14 years old. My father wanted me to get held back a grade in school because he wanted me to be a star athlete, and then another family in the area had done that and had become the MVP of the state and everything else. And so he put a lot of pressure on me to get held back. And I ultimately told him as a 14-year-old, it was the last year you can decide before you lose eligibility, that I didn't want to do it. And he looked me dead in the eyes. He said, "Okay, well, just so you know, you're not good enough. You'll never play again." And all I heard as a 14-year-old is, "You're not good enough." And so I wrote that on my hat and put it under there. And I wore that hat for the next 3 years in high school that said, "You're not good enough." And I just ingrained this into my mind, which, like, as an adult, when I thought of this, I was like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done to myself?" And so I never felt like I was good enough, right? I never felt like I was lovable, which is, again, one of the four things our inner child is always going to be screaming, is whether or not we're lovable, whether or not we're safe, whether or not we belong, and all those different things. And so as I'm sitting there and I see my hat as an adult, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I have to, like, heal this." And, it started making sense, a lot of the behaviors and things that I was doing. I mean, I remember I would go on a date with every cute girl I could. I was posting all of my successes online all the time. I was trying to show that my life was good enough. And what I was really doing is, there was this little boy inside of me that's just screaming, like, "Please love me. I promise I'm worthy to be loved, right? I'm enough." And because I hadn't healed that, it looked probably ridiculous to anybody that was watching from the sidelines, my social media, just going, "Man, this dude really is desperately trying to show that he's trying to get validated." And it's guilty. I was. And I remember one time I went on a date in the morning, went to the college football game that was local here, and took a beautiful date. And then that night went to the fair and took a different date. I posted both pictures on social media on the same damn day. It was like, you can't be stupider, but I just had so much need for validation because of this, belief that I had ingrained in myself, that I wasn't lovable or I wasn't good enough. And so for me, I really had to work hard to unwind that and start to just understand that I didn't need to show up anyway. I just am lovable, and I'm worthy of that, regardless of any kind of accomplishments or achievements that I had.
External validation's addicting, man, and you're seeing that a lot now, and I think it takes, just like any addiction, it takes a lot of self-awareness to understand that you have an unhealthy relationship with something, and that you have a problem. What was the path like for you to, like, gain some level of awareness around your behavior with that, and then how did you come to terms with all that so that you could start to validate yourself for who you truly were?
Yeah, I mean, part of the gift that I got is I hadn't thought of that hat or seen that hat in, 15 years. I was actually doing a mushroom trip of, like, it was my first one ever, my first time ever doing a journey. And that's when I saw my hat. My subconscious fed me the information that I needed. And as soon as I saw it, I kind of had, like, this, like, download or voice or whatever, just basically said, "This has served you. It no longer does. Time to let it go." And just the awareness of what I'd done, like the way that I was functioning, I'd studied enough and done enough, of my own work to realize what that meant. And so in that moment, I just kind of realized that, I was good enough. And then it's just catching yourself, right? Like, we all, just asking yourself questions like, wait, am I posting this because I'm trying to share something that I think is going to affect different people? Or am I trying to get seen? Am I trying to get validated? Am I trying to mask something, right? Like, in my book, I talk about this a lot, that a lot of the behaviors that we do, we're trying to feel better. And so a lot of times we'll post something hoping we'll get the clicks and the likes and all that kind of stuff. But really, the key is not to try to feel better, it's to try to feel more. And so sometimes you just have to let those emotions in. You have to experience them, and realize, like, maybe at times you weren't loved. Maybe at times you were less than where you wanted to be. But I think just having the awareness is the way to kind of start working through that. And then having good people around you that will call you out, right? Like, having people that'll be like, "Bro, why are you doing this? Like, what do you want here? What are you trying to do?" I was recently on a podcast with one of my close friends, and this guy ran a multi-billion-dollar fund. And I remember he talked about this on the podcast, but I called him out once because he was talking about the life that he used to have. But even as he was saying it, he was, like, bragging about it. And he was really, the energy of it was just wrong. And I said, "Dude, you're still trying to get validated with that story. You're acting like you're healed from it, but what you're really doing is still," and just having good friends that'll call you out. And I've got plenty of people in my life that do the same for me, and kind of anchor me and keep me grounded as well. And, just friends that don't let you get away with your own, people that, and then it's just being teachable, being willing to, when people give you feedback or give you advice, you're willing to take it and willing to hear it.
Yeah, there's a quote I saw on social media, I don't know when, it was something like, insecurity is loud, confidence is quiet, or something like that. Where it's like you just know, like it's like the people who have money like don't talk about it because, or the people who are secure with their money, they don't talk about it.
There's a great quote by Keanu Reeves when he's like, because like people just want to fight, you know. And I always say, like, anybody that's trying to fight you on the internet, like they're not happy. Don't engage. Like they're not fighting in good faith. They're obviously miserable because happy people don't fight on the internet. And he says, like, I'm to the point in my life where if somebody says that 2 + 2 = 5, I'm like, awesome, bro. Good for you. You know, he's like, I don't need to convince people to see life my way. And I think that's what confidence is. It's like, you know, that your life works for you. You know that you're getting what you need or whatever. And so you don't really care if other people agree with it. You're not trying to be right. You're just trying to, you know, honestly just enjoy your life and be happy.
Yeah, and like I've definitely been in the similar situation where I've tried to like brag or kind of posture about some of the things that I've done or some things that I've accomplished, both publicly and privately. And the older I've gotten, the less I do it just because the more I just have learned to know myself and I know that I don't have to do that in order for people to like me. But the funny thing is, we've all been around those people. It's like the very thing we want when we're sharing those things is like validation for them to like us for who we are, to be loved. And yet that very thing pushes people, like authentic people, away from you because they hear that and it like makes most people who are secure like cringe.
Yeah,
Like,
we've all been in a room where some guy started bragging about his car, and everyone in the room is just like, "Dude, what are you doing?" You
or
know,
bragging
like,
about the
you're
people that
in.
they
I
know, you
always
know?
like to say, yeah, I like to say to people, I'm like, "Dude, you're here. You're in the room. Like, we want you here, or you wouldn't be here. You don't need to impress us, you know, or stuff like that." But we all do it. You're right. I mean, it's just a natural thing, and that is those insecurities coming out. And it's, by the way, like this whole thing of, you know, self-love or loving yourself or being enough and all this, like it's a constant game. Like you never I don't think you ever get to 100%. I think that you're just trying your best to get as close as you can to that, and maybe there's moments of that, but like, yeah, it's an ongoing thing all the time that you have to be, you know, working on constantly.
Why do you think so many men are struggling right now?
I think society has set it up that's made it a little bit difficult in some ways for men that maybe don't have advantages, right? And in the past, I think men did have the advantages over women. I think it was an unfair balance. I think that, you know, again, Chris Williamson said this on my podcast. He said, I think that you know, the male patriarchy is being punished for sins of the past. Like there was an imbalance before, and there was problems with the way it was set up, and nowadays, you know, the pendulum's almost swung too far. Like, you know, males, adult men are about the only group that doesn't get any empathy from other groups, right? It's like if a, you know, woman or, you know, maybe some underprivileged type people have something happen, like everyone wants to help them and fix the problem. If a, you know, if a man or whatever has the same issue, people are like, dude, get your shit together, figure it out, you know. And I do think that there's, you know, there is that responsibility of men to be able to shoulder extra things. We're built in order to do that. But I think that it hasn't been safe for men to be able to talk about these things. And a mistake that I think some men make is, you know, they want to unload everything on their woman, and now their woman feels unsafe, and now they got an even bigger problem. So they've been punished for doing it in the past. What they need, men need other strong men to be able to talk with. They need to be able to be vulnerable and authentic, and those conversations need to happen amongst men. And I think the problem with today in society is we don't have those natural places where men can go to connect. We did in the past. People went to the barber shop, or they went fishing, or they went to the pub. They had these spots where men just congregated, right? And nowadays it's much more difficult. And even when they are together, maybe at a sports game or whatever it might be, there's just more distractions. There's more technology and things. And so the conversations tend to stay more surface, and men don't have the outlets like they used to. And so it's part of my whole mission is to create these containers for men to feel safe to talk about their feelings and talk about it with other men that can support them and create community. Whereas, like, you know, you go to a lot of guys, they try to go to their woman with this, and now all of a sudden you got an even bigger problems in your hands, right? And there's things to take to your women, but most of the time, as a man, you're part of your responsibility is to be able to shield your children and your wife or girlfriend from some of these dangers of the universe and the world that are upon us. And so I think it's so important. I think the problem we have today is not enough opportunities for men to connect on deep levels. And it's kind of become my life mission is to create these spaces. And I've seen it now. I've got hundreds of men in my program, and every single one of these guys, when they have these safe places to open up, they spring out of their chairs. They've been dying to find a place that will accept them and understand that, you know what, it's okay not to be okay, and we're going to be able to support you here, and we're going to give you, you know, the tools to help you so that as a group we can lift each other up and not do it at the expense of the safety of our spouses or people that are relying upon us.
I think another layer to this problem is that men don't understand what it actually means to be vulnerable. Like they think it just means to just express emotion, and that could mean a million different things. So I'd love to hear your perspective on what it actually looks like to express emotion and be vulnerable in a healthy way as a man.
Yeah, yeah, I think, again, we've heard a lot of things in the past, and it's where some of these labels come in of like toxic masculinity and things like that. Is like men didn't express any of their emotions, and then it bottles up and explodes out in really negative ways, right? And I don't believe there is any toxic masculinity. I think there's toxic behaviors, and I think that we have, masculine and feminine energies, and but I think being vulnerable is a tricky subject because you can't be vulnerable with everybody. Like I said earlier, you don't want to be vulnerable with everyone. You want to be able to express certain feelings in the right context and be able to talk about them. But I think where we get in trouble with vulnerability is, people say like they just, oh, I'm going to share something from my past. I'm going to be vulnerable. It's like, no, it's like vulnerable is like, I'm not doing good right now. Like I need, I'm having a moment right now, and being able to ask for what you need, be able to talk about things. I see so many men today, they're not able to talk when they have a problem with somebody. They just like completely get avoidant, right? We know attachment styles. They get anxiously attached or they avoid it or whatever else. It's like, no, like let's have enough emotion, let's have enough maturity, and to be able to have tough conversations with people that we need to, but be able to do it not being reactive and letting, the 12-year-old boy inside of us that's hurt be the one that's driving the wheel and be able to do that work. And so I think the more that you can tap into your own feelings and understand what's going on and be able to express that in a healthy way, I think that vulnerability is what we're looking for. What we don't need is people trying to get, sympathy or empathy or have an agenda around being more open with, maybe things from their past or their agendas and things like that.
You talked about an exercise I heard you on Chris's podcast where you went to this, I think it was like Pelican Bay, and you had like all these men kind of step forward in a way that I thought was really interesting. And I think you also kind of implement that in your work too. I think the audience would really enjoy hearing what you do.
Yeah. When I launched my coaching program, I was trying to, I mean, look, dude, I was like, who am I to coach other men? Like, I have so many things I'm trying to figure out still, and so many things I don't do that well. But then it kind of came to me and it was like, you know what? If I just teach the things that were the most impactful to me, I know it'll be impactful to them. And so I'd had this really beautiful experience. A friend of mine had invited me to go to Pelican Bay Prison, which is basically, like the worst prison in America. It's like on the movie Training Day, he literally like that's when Denzel's like, I'll send you to Pelican Bay because he's like, I'll send you to the worst place. And so I had this opportunity. It was about 30, 40 entrepreneurs. We fly up. It's in Northern California on the border of Oregon. And we had the opportunity to teach 100 of the inmates staying there at Pelican Prison. These are like the dudes that are lifers in for murder. And I mean, you name it. Like these are the dudes that are, you know, belong in prison kind of thing. And so we get there and I was so intimidated getting there because you're like, man, is this going to be dangerous? Is this going to be scary? And it was such a beautiful experience. From the second we walked in, they were so excited to see us. They were cheering for us and they were just so pumped that some people would care enough to come and pour into them. And so we get into this place and we start doing these different exercises. At one point, the lady's name is Kat Hoke, Catherine Hoke. She's been on my podcast, the Jimmy Rex Show, just an incredible human. And she does this exercise called step to the line. And basically what it is showing that we have some privilege, right? And I think it's okay to recognize that maybe where you have privilege, you can give more back to other people. And it's not necessarily like I think we hear a lot about like white privilege, but there's a lot of privileges. There's privileges of having two parents. There's privileges of just born into a different situation than other people, or more athletic, better looking. Like these are all huge privileges to society in the way that we all function together. And so they had this exercise where she called it step to the line. And so she had the 40 inmates the 100 inmates on one side, the 30, 40 entrepreneurs on the other. And she starts asking a series of questions. And one of the questions, like early on, she'll be like, if you had a mom and a dad in the house when you were younger, step to the line. If you ever had to sleep on the streets as a child, step up to the line. And when she asks like a question like that, it's most of the inmates and none of the entrepreneurs, right? Business owners. And then at one point, I remember she said, if you can remember your mom tucking you in at least once a week, step to the line. You didn't have like a single one of the inmates, but like every entrepreneur. And she keeps asking these questions. You start realizing, oh my gosh, the privilege that I had growing up that I never even realized. And then at one point she says, if you've ever committed a felony, please step to the line. And it's like every inmate, right? And then maybe I think one of the entrepreneurs stepped up to the line, and this woman, she goes, so beautiful. She goes, I'm sorry, you must have misheard me. I didn't say if you got caught for a felony, if you've committed a felony. If you've ever been in a fight, that is a felony and you could have gone to prison for it. A lot of the men that you see on the other side of this line, that's how it started for them, was a simple fight in their household or with a friend. And so I'm like, oh, I'm definitely committed some felonies. So I stepped to the line. We all do, right? And you start to just see the privilege that you had, and it was just this beautiful experience. We're all, in tears, just like looking at these men. You're staring across from each other too, so it's so powerful. You're looking at each other's eyes, and it just humanizes them, and so much empathy for them and the situation they've been in. And so, because it was such a humanizing experience, and it helped us see that we're all in this thing together. None of us are alone. And so I wanted to kind of incorporate that in some way with my men's program. And so the first weekend we all get together. I have 50 of the guys. We all get in a circle and I rattle off a series of 40, 45 questions. And I start it pretty simple, like if your parents ever divorced when you were little, step up to the line. One of the first questions I ask is like, if you're afraid you're going to disappoint your kids one day, please step up to the line. And every dad basically steps up to the line and has the same fear. And then it gets a little bit more difficult, and I say stuff like, if you've ever thought that today would be your last day, or if you've ever committed suicide, please step up to the line. It's like half the guys step up to the line. By this point, there's not a dry eye. Everybody's bawling. And you just really humanize. You're like, if you've ever had a problem with pornography, if you've ever been cheated on, if you've ever cheated on somebody, if you probably need to go home and have a tough conversation with your spouse or girlfriend right now because you've been unfaithful to them. And you're seeing this, and there's no judgment. Like everybody in that circle is just in this thing together. So much humanity in it. And after that, it really sets the stage for everybody to want to share more about their own selves and more about their own stories, because they no longer are afraid to be seen. They're no longer afraid that they're going to be judged because of these things that they've happened to them in the past. And so it's just a beautiful exercise to really, let men be seen, a lot of them for the first time, and loved in that state. And I think when a man gets seen and loved in his nakedness, when he sees, like, for all of his problems, for all of his insecurities, for all of his, he's still just lovable, it really sets a tone for these men to go deep with each other, and they'll run through walls for each other after that.
That's beautiful, man. I think men can be very prideful, right? And I think on the other side of pride is shame. And when they do something wrong, like they cheat on their spouse, or they maybe get into a fight that they wish they wouldn't have gotten into, or say something to their kids that they should have never said, or whatever the example is, there's a lot of shame around that, and they internalize it and beat themselves up, right? I mean, I've definitely done that when I've made mistakes. How do you help these men like deal with shame, like outside of just admitting like what it is that they're dealing with? Like, how can they start to do the work to have a better relationship with that?
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing about shame is, shame is I'm bad, whereas instead of saying I did something bad, like that's accountability, that's, taking ownership of things that we've done, and shame is I am bad, right? Or like I'm a bad person. And so first thing is honestly just recognizing that difference right there. The second thing, I share my story, and I have a couple, other people share their stories. When all of a sudden you can be vulnerable with other people. So like if you want to help people that are in the shame cycle, you share some stuff of your own, and when they don't judge you for it, and then they know you're not going to judge them for it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can trust this relationship, I can trust this human being. I think that's the first step to really breaking down that shame. It's once people see you, and like I had a buddy that I wrote about this in the book, it's in the first chapter, and he was suicidal and he was about to take his own life. And I ended up going on a hike with him, and on this hike, we got talking, and he was like, "Why are you here, man?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just feel like I need to be here." And he was basically admitted that he was really considering ending it that week. And he just broke down. He's like, he was just beating himself up, so much shame over something that he had done. And I was just like, as he was telling me about it, I'm like, dude, I just gave him another perspective. And to me, he was the hero in the story. Like, I couldn't believe how well he had behaved considering everything that had happened. And he says to me, he says, it helped me get through and past it, thinking maybe there's more to this that I'm not seeing. And just being able to talk about it, just being able to bring it out of the darkness, because by the way, shame festers in the dark, shame grows in the dark. And so just by being able to have a conversation with another man, this is why it's so important for men to have friends that know how to hold space for them. And that's a skill. And it's a skill a lot of people don't know how to do. They get afraid. They start thinking like, oh man, I don't want to be the person to send this person over the top. And so, but that in its of itself can cause more shame because they can tell the person's uncomfortable with what they're talking about. And so it really is learning the skills, the communication techniques. And that's a lot of what I cover with men when I coach them as well, is because people need to know how to even be able to hold those spaces. But when you can do that for another human, then all of a sudden, when you put a light on the shame and you're like, dude, you're good, then the shame starts to go away.
What are some of the things you've had to work on as a man in the last year or two?
My big push, I mean, for the longest time, my biggest insecurity was just being a single guy. I had gone through different phases. I'd had my heart broken a few times when I was younger. And so then I went through my party phase and, a 10-year run where I just dated around and didn't take any girls serious. And then last May, I really was like, okay, I'm ready to tackle this. Like, I really want to do this different. I want to get into a relationship. I want to start a family. And so I really went after it. And the way I go after anything is I find the person that is where I used to be that's now where I want to go. And so I hired a couple coaches one on one. One was a guy named Stefano Safondos, who I think is one of the best relationship coaches in the world, and a guy named Neil Strauss, who wrote the book The Game, and then 10 years later wrote The Truth. And I've got a coaching call with him as soon as we're done, in fact. And I hired these guys because I thought they were the best in the world at it. And that's what I do with anything, right? I try to find the best people possible. And by the way, like, you don't have to hire these kind of coaches, but you can read their books, you can read their information, you can follow them and see their videos. In some way, you want to get mentored by people that are there. But so I hired these guys and really started digging in to what my problem was. I mean, I knew I was standing on the edge of a cliff and all I had to do was jump and I'd get myself into a healthy relationship, but I couldn't get myself to do it. So we started to unpack a lot of what that was. And so I've been working my ass off for the last year to really do this. And finally started working a little while ago. I got into a healthy relationship and it's been cool. I mean, we haven't been going that long, but there's been multiple moments already where that 8-year-old that's hurt inside of me gets triggered. And like, I would have blown up this relationship 3 times in the last 2 weeks, a year and a half, 2 years ago. But I know how to handle it now. And I told you this before the call, is why I was late getting on this podcast, but we started our relationship with therapy. And so we're seeing a therapist from the beginning to kind of work through some things. I got that idea from Lewis Howes and when he was on my podcast, and just some of these really cool things that I'm trying the best I can, because I want to show up and be the best boyfriend and provider and spouse and all those things that I can be. But that's been a real that's where the journey's been for me the last year and a half, is really diving into some of these things. And there was a lot of pain there. There was a lot of things that had happened that I'd never looked at. And I got through to those with breath work and with my counselors and with my coaches and stuff, and really just been able to do for me what I believe is a really great job of digging into some of these things and healing them.
What were some of the limiting beliefs you've had to work through to get to a healthy relationship?
One of the biggest ones for me was I had never, I had like growing up, our house, my dad could be a little bit explosive and my mom was very avoidant. So like she was also like just trying to create safety for herself. But, we didn't have anybody to kind of take care of us when these things would happen. And so for me, my nervous system was very uncomfortable with any woman taking care of me, any woman trying to pour into me. I always wanted to reject that energy. And so I had to understand that and be able to start healing that wound and that feminine wound of not letting people take care of me. And it's been cool. I have friends and we're there for each other. And a couple of them, we were all hanging out one night and their wives were there. And I'm super close with these women and these guys. And they were like, well, what do we do to help you with this? Because I was being a little vulnerable and opening up, and I said, well, like what I need is to be able to receive when women are trying to help or take care of me or do anything for me and not have to ask for it, but not have an expectation that I have to do something to get it. And I'll be damned if like within the next month, my one buddy's wife decorated my whole house for Christmas. Another one cooked me a meal. Another one cleaned out my whole pantry and cleaned my house. Like they just start doing stuff to just let me know that I could accept this. And it was so uncomfortable for me. Even the thought of it was so uncomfortable at first. But as I started to be able to do that, I started being able to heal a little bit of that nervous system. And so that's been some of the work. I mean, I've literally read 12 books on relationships in the last year. I think one of the biggest things I went to the Tony Robbins relationship mastermind out in Maui last year, just in October. and learned a couple things. One of the I just had to learn some better skills, honestly, like how to communicate in a relationship, like when you get triggered, how to react, and giving yourself time to be able to understand what's going on so that you don't react from a negative place and you don't blow up your relationship, stuff like that. And so I've been putting forward a hero's effort, man, and just putting a lot of work in, and doing the same thing I teach others to do, right? Is like studying it, practicing it. Another big thing that I've been doing that Stefanos invited me to do is going into nature for at least an hour or two at a time with no phone, and just sitting and just being and just allowing. He says, like, the secrets of the universe come to us in silence, solace, and solitude. And so I'll just do that like once a week. For sometimes I'll do a day or two at a time. I'll just go up to a cabin by myself and just freaking sit, no phone, just really allow my body and my feelings to come to me. And after you sit there for a long time, you start to kind of get some answers to what's going on. And that's been huge. Just in general, slowing down, creating more space in my life for a woman to be there. I think women know when you don't have space for them. And I had so many things going on that I truly didn't have space for a relationship. And so I had to start removing some things from my life that I enjoyed or that I wanted to try and do, but that wasn't serving me that way. And so a lot of those types of things of what I've been doing over the last year and a half.
That's awesome, man. And I would imagine that like a lot of the men that you've coached and that you work with, their number one struggle is relationship stuff too. I mean, would you say that is the common theme of if you were to like poll all the men that you coach, like the number one thing that they're battling right now, is it relationship stuff or is it more like self-esteem related to who they are?
Yeah, I think there's 3 things that, like, a man needs to dial in, like, that are number 1, 2, and 3, and they're probably all equal, but, like, number it all has to do with, like, feeling respected or feeling valued, but 1 is that relationship, your romantic relationship. 2 is financially, like, just having a purpose and something bigger than yourself, but, like, knowing what just being in a good place financially. I think it's very difficult for men if they're don't have basic needs taken care of and they can't do things for the people in their lives. And then the third one is just the physical appearance and how you feel about your body and your physical health, honestly. And then from there, I'd say the fourth and fifth ones are your relationship with God, and then your community relationships. Like, how are you fitting in? Do you have a group of friends and people like that? But those are the big ones. I definitely think that if you don't have a great relationship, there's definitely a level of growth that is missing from your life, and things that you could be you can't really tackle them without doing that. And so I do think that the romantic relationship is, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a huge key for any guy.
What are some of the daily habits you have your guys focus on in order to improve who they are as a man?
Yeah, I had recently had Jim Quick on my podcast. He had the number one best-selling book last year and all these different things, and brilliant man. And I loved what he said. I think we get caught up because there's so many podcasts, there's so much information, there's so many people that have their ideas of what like routines or what you need to do every day to be successful. And I like how Alex Hormozy says it. He's like, if you need the 3-hour morning routine to get in a place where you can work, like you're a loser. Like just get up and go to work. And I remember like even when I was building my business, I'd wake up and within a half hour I was at the office. So like I always hesitate to say what my routines are because it's not what made me successful. But that being said, I love what Jim said, and I've been incorporating this because it's so simple. He goes, you can do this in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And he talked about the 4 elements, right? You got fire, wood, air, and ground. And he basically said, fire's the sun. So go outside and just let the sun hit you like that. Just such an important thing, right? Like air, do some breathing exercises and really get all that congestion from the night before built out. Like do some deep breathing, set your nervous system. And I said water, get a big glass of water in the morning, and then ground is just to ground your feet, go walk in the grass a little bit. 5-minute routine. I've been doing that. I think it's great. A couple things I do though, every day, or at least try to. I have to get to the gym every day. That one's a must to me. I've been going on these walks. So like for me, I try to do a walk every morning at 7 a.m. I actually have one of the guys that I coach meets me at 7 a.m. every day, a different guy. They set appointments. They meet me at my door at 7 a.m. and we start the day by going on a 40-minute walk around my park by my house. And so it's a really cool way to start the day and get those 4 elements in, to be honest. And then other things that I do is, I try to, I do a gratitude list every day too. I have 4 or 5 guys that we'll send each other gratitude lists, 3 or 4 things we're grateful for that day, and pretty much hit every single day. And, I think what that does is it puts your brain in a state of gratitude, which our brain is God bless it, but it's looking for what's going wrong all the time. And so many people get fixated on what's wrong in their life or where's the danger, where's problems. And when you instead focus on gratitude, you can literally hijack your own brain. And instead of looking for what's going wrong, you start looking for what's going right. And that changes everything. So I start my day with the gratitude list every single day. And then just little things, man, like, I try to call 5 friends every day and just have a conversation, just random. Most people only hear from their friends when they need something or if it's a special occasion. And so I'll pick up my phone all the time. I do this several times a day and I'll just call a random friend. I don't have to say, I just like call them. I'll have a funny story. I'll just have a ridiculous experience and we'll just laugh our asses off, and I do that with all my close friends. Like the other day, me and my girlfriend went to South Carolina. I was had a speaking gig in North Carolina, and we drove down afterwards. And she told me that her favorite movie was The Notebook, and so we went on this little tour of all the little places where they filmed The Notebook, including found the house that like he rehabs there on the movie. And we had to like to get to the house. You're not supposed to visit this house. It's like off limits. It's a private residence. We had to go down this dirt road to this dead end, and we're like hopping fence and like crawling through the bushes. And it was just this funny story. And so I was just calling my buddies, and we just talk and laugh about it. And one of my buddies was calling me and just talking about like a funny thing that happened at the pool with his kid. And we're just having these stupid conversations that don't mean anything, but they actually mean everything. And I call it the Seinfeld conversation. Just it doesn't have to anything to do with anything. You don't ask for anything. You're not offering anything. You simply just call and jam with them. I think that's one of the habits that I've gotten in that's made a big difference with my relationships too, is just having those conversations every day.
The big theme of your message is integrity, and you talk about like getting in integrity. And I think integrity is one of those things that takes decades to build, right? And then you can lose it in seconds, right? You can blow up your entire brand, relationships within a matter of seconds by doing something that's out of integrity. But a lot of times, if people lack self awareness and they're just end up like creating some other version of themselves based on the people they're spending time with or based on these ideas they may have, they don't even know if they're acting out of integrity. So, what are some of the key things you do either for yourself or with the men that you coach to keep yourself in check when it comes to integrity?
Yeah, and by the way, like integrity is something that you were constantly always having to vigilantly watch as well, right? I mean, just ask yourself good questions. Like I always tell the guys, like, when you're doing something shitty. When you're out of integrity. When you liked that girl's picture because you secretly wanted her to notice it and you have a little crush on her, but you're married, or like you lingered a little bit on that hug because you wanted the girl to feel a little something from you. Like, when you're doing these things. And in the book, I call it having leaky energy, right? Like you just have leaky energy. And my friend Cody Sperber talks about this. He was talking to my group last week. I love the way that he puts it. He basically said, these are the yellow lights. He's like, you get in trouble from the yellow lights. You don't get in trouble from the red lights. Red light is like, grabbing your secretary's ass or cheating on your wife. Like most people don't start with the red lights. Like, not to do the red light. Where they get in trouble is the yellow light, right? And we know what those are. Like everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that. And so it's really being in integrity is just if you're doing the right thing, how you're showing up, if you're being honest about it, why you followed that girl back. And so I think being in integrity is just constantly checking yourself and just saying, like, and when I was in real estate full time, I just asked myself one question all the time. Does everybody involved have all the information they should to make the best decision? The answer was yes. I know it's in integrity, right? And I never make money off someone unless they know. Like that's another rule I have to keep me in integrity. And then I just play this game and I call it being a good person. It's like, I can't tell you how many times I go to use a bathroom in a public place and there's piss all over the seat. Like it's so stupid. It's like if you pee on the seat, be a good person. Like wipe it off. Like that's such an easy thing to do to be a good person. If a wrapper falls out of your hand onto the ground, you stop and you pick it up. Like be a good person. And the more you get radically in integrity, the more that easier it gets to do it. And it's like, if I tell somebody I'm going to be 15 minutes, but I really know it's going to be a half hour, I'm out of integrity. So, like with you, what most people would have done on this podcast, I mean, Doug, like I got done with my appointment before this and I looked at my clock. I was like, oh, I'm going to have a problem here. Well, at first I knew I might have a problem. So I called you ahead of time. And what did I say? I let you know, hey, man, are you good? I'm going to be 15 minutes late. Now you can plan your day 2 hours ahead. Like, okay, let's move it. So we moved it to 6:30 instead of 6. Then I got out of my appointment and I realized I was gonna be 10 minutes late. So I immediately text you, hey, I'm running 10 minutes late. It's not that I can't be late, it's that I did it in a way that kept me in integrity. Like that matters to me, my word. I'm not just gonna jump on 10 minutes late and you're sitting there for 10 minutes wondering what's going on. Are we still doing this podcast? Did Jimmy stand me up? Like, you could have gotten calls done or done something else. And so to me, integrity is just like, just that. Like to me, it mattered. Like I'd never even met you before, but it mattered to me because I told you something that I kept my word on that. And when I couldn't do exactly what I said, I made sure as well as I could, I prepped that so that you could make a decision if it still worked for you. And so to me, that's what integrity looks like. And I'm obsessed with that idea of just like, wait, like, like a lot of, there's all these different ideas on the internet about how you like, I saw this crazy video the other day that somebody's like, you should sleep with X amount of women before you get married, or you should be this years old before you get married. Like all these different ideas around dating and sex, and people don't know how to handle these situations. And ultimately, my one rule was like, am I in integrity? If I'm going to sleep with a random woman, does she know what this is? Like, does she know this is just random for me? Or have I tried to convince her this is going to go somewhere and that's why she's willing to sleep with me? Like, that's the difference. It's like, you don't have to, this isn't a moral thing where it's like, don't drink alcohol ever. It's like, wait, like, check yourself. Are you drinking because you're sad and you're trying to mask emotions? Or are you trying to celebrate and have an experience with your friends? Like, that matters. Like, those details of why you're sleeping with the random girl at the bar, like how you got her into your bed, like all those kinds of things matter. And the integrity behind it is kind of really the point of the whole thing. And so I try to let people know, like, it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. Just if you're doing it in integrity, I think, you're going to have more confidence. Like if you do things the right way, you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to feel right about the way you're living. And if you don't, then you're pulling deposits out of your self-esteem because you've lied to get this situation. You've done something illegally or just immorally or whatever that might be. And I think that's the whole key to being in integrity.
Yeah, unless you're completely like, I guess, like unaware at all. Like, when you're acting out of integrity, like you do something, your gut tells you, you're like, man, I shouldn't have done that. Like you said, I shouldn't have followed her back. I shouldn't have replied to that text. I shouldn't have, whatever the example is, like, right? So you're only hurting yourself at the end of the day.
Well, and in the documentary I made, if anybody wants to go to my YouTube, you can see I made a little over an hour documentary of one of my events that really shows how we do this deeper work. And in the documentary, I talk about one of my buddies that went to the strip club. Well, I've gone to strip clubs. I've have friends that go to strip clubs. Like, if you're in integrity, like I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Like, is your wife okay with it? If you guys have an agreement or you guys are okay with that, like truly, and you like honor that agreement, then it's a different thing. This particular case, the buddy in the video, him and his wife were not okay with that. She absolutely had a problem with that and he lied about it. And so that's the difference, what it looks like. Like, this isn't, again, it's not a moral stand where it's like you have to be this way and you have to be approved and all these different things. Like, you can absolutely send it in different ways in your life as far as you want. But do the people that it's affecting, are you guys in integrity? Are you guys in agreement that this is okay? Do your business partners know what you're doing? Does your wife know? Do your kids know? Or are you lying to maybe make it look like you're being a good person when in reality you're going against the morals that you guys have established together?
You talked about how you and Chris shared on your show, or he shared when you were on his show, about people think that what's loudest is what's right, or something like that on social media. And a lot of times what's quietest is wrong, right? I would imagine that a lot of guys have come through your program, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, in that in order to be seen as somebody who's high value and successful, they need to be driving like the car, or they need to be making like six figures, or they need to have six pack abs. And not to say that those things aren't important to some degree, because I think they are. But when they come to you, they should be working, they say they want this, but they really should be working on that. Like, what would that be?
Well, a lot of times the first question I ask is, what emotion are you trying to feel? Right? Like, what are you wanting to buy the car because you have this insecurity or this void that needs, the little kid inside of you like got burned and you're trying to mask like something else happening? Or is it a way for you to give back or what? I don't know. Like, there's a million different things. And I think it's just ultimately comes down to why you're doing the things you're doing. Like, I have no problem with money, but for me, money helps me have crazy experiences, right? Like, I'm doing a cruise this weekend with 50 couples that are friends of mine that I coach. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff if you don't have money. I'm going to New York with my girlfriend in a couple of weeks. I'm going to climb the mountains in Uganda with my best friends from high school, in July and go climb with gorillas. Like I love to be able to do things, and you need money to do that. And I'm not able to establish like to really put the message out of what I'm trying to do if I can't build a bigger platform and I can't spread that. So like the idea of what this success is like for me, money allows me to do really cool things. It allows me to give experiences. It allows me to step up for friends. Like we have a guy in our group we just found out had some pretty aggressive cancer, and he wasn't going to be able to get surgery on it because he didn't have any money. And so I called him up. One of the other guys in the group let me know about it. This was May 9th, is when he got the surgery. But one of the guys in the group just said, "Hey man, so and so's not doing so well. His surgeries or his cancer's back and it's pretty bad." And so I called the guy and he wasn't going to do it. He said, "Dude, I would. I don't have the money." And I was like, "Well, how much is it?" And gave me the amount. And I just told him, I said, "It'll be in your account tomorrow. Like, go get yourself fixed." And he was like, it was funny. He's like, "I can't accept that." I said, "You don't have a choice, dude. You're dying." And he kind of chuckled and he's like, "Dude, I don't know if I can I said, "Dude, what the hell else would you rather I spend my money on?" And, that's to me, that's the reason to have success. To me, that's the reason to have money. Like to be able to be that person for someone in your life that has been there for you, to be able to give those experiences. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. It could be, I want to have money so that I don't have to work so I can show up at my kid's baseball game. It might be so that I can I can walk out of a meeting at work if I need to because my wife's having a little bit of a breakdown, like whatever that thing might be. But money really is just going to give you freedom, and so there is value to those things. Like, and you don't have to have a six pack, but there is something to be said with setting a standard of health for your family or for your kids. And so while I don't think you need to have a six pack, you do have to be in shape a little bit. Like, if like hit the fan tomorrow, could you carry your kids to safety? Could you run a couple miles and go get help if you needed to? If your kid like fell and broke his leg or something, like there's so many things that like, and again, there's levels to this game, but I think ultimately it's, are you doing the work on yourself emotionally? Can people trust you? Can people rely upon you? And I think when people know that again, I said this at the beginning, but like when people know that because you're in their life is going to be better, and maybe like their life can never go to complete hell, that is one of the most empowering things a human being can experience. And I think it's a very important one.
What's your message to like the women that are listening to this podcast? I have a lot of female listeners, and I think that they're often wondering about men and why men are struggling, and maybe how can be a better partner? How can they support them better? How can they get their man to open up? Like, what advice do you have for women as a whole?
Women want to be loved and men want to be respected. Like women, like really show that respect to your men, show that you trust them, show that. And by the way, men have to earn this, but they're going to earn it a lot faster. They're going to get it a lot faster if it starts with a place where the woman just trusts them. If you're always second guessing them and questioning them, and a lot of you have had a lot of pain around the men in your life not showing up the way that they've needed to, but you don't get somebody to change their behaviors by nagging on them and beating them up about it. You do it by encouraging when they do it right. And so the more you can respect them, the more you can show trust in them, the quicker those behaviors are going to change. Human beings will do what they need to feel safe, both women and men. And so the more safety you can create for him, the more you can help support him, the better he's just going to be able to show up. But and we've talked this whole podcast about the issues around men. And by the way, women have the exact same amount of issues that unfortunately aren't working for them in society. Right? We could do a whole nother podcast on that. But women, I think, have been sold a little bit of a lie that they should be more like men, or they need to, be more in charge, or some of these things like women at their core. And Tony Robbins talks about this, like that feminine desire to nurture and to give and to care for and all that. Like that's a real thing. And the more a woman taps into that, that's her power. The more that she's willing to be kind and gentle and soft, the harder women get. They have to imagine, by the way, God bless them. Like women will, one of their three things they have to do is be feeling safe. And so if they don't feel safe, they put on a masculine shell. That's what my mother had to do. And so when women have to do that, it is the fault of the man in their life, whether their father, brother, husband, whoever that might be. But the more that you can strip that masculine shell and get into your true power, which is in that feminine beauty and love, the better you're going to have a life. Like you're just going to enjoy your life more. And so I think the key is for men to create that safety and for women to recognize when they're doing that and to be able to just communicate. I think in general, couples, whether it's men or women, They just need to communicate more about what's really going on, what they need, and be able to recognize those signs. Like if your man's tired or beat up a little bit, talk about it. This is something I learned at the Tony Robbins event I went to, and God, that event cost me a fortune, but it was worth every penny because he taught us how to communicate. And one of the things that he said, he's like, too often women, they just assume the guy knows what they need, and the guy assumes the woman knows what they need, right? I'll give you an example. One of the couples that I coach, she was frustrated because when he would come home from work, he'd always like smack her and want to just start kissing her and things like that. And she's like, I've been with the kids all day. I just want him to hold me. I just want to know that he cares about me. Then I talked to him and he's like, dude, my wife, I know she's home all day with the kids and she probably gets beat down by, doing chores and stuff. So I want her to feel sexy. So I grab her and I try to kiss her. Like he's means well. He's just a freaking monkey. He doesn't get it. Right. And so they never talked about it. They'd never literally in 13 years of marriage, it never neither of them had talked about what they needed. And so I said, when he comes home, what do you need to the woman? I said, what do you need to feel safe and to feel like he cares? And as she said, I just want him to hold me. I want him to take 20 seconds and just hold me. Don't say anything. Don't do anything. Don't grab my butt. Just hold me. I said, great. And I said, are you willing to do that? He's like, of course. I had no idea. I said to him, what do you need? And he said, and then he said what he needed or whatever. And they'd never discussed this in 13 years of marriage. And they've been thriving since they figured this out. It's like just talking about what we need, talking about our needs, talking about, we want people to just guess and to just know. And like men like need to do a better job of trying to figure out what's really going on with the women. And that takes a lot of study and doing and things like that. But ultimately, I think just being able to express what it is we need and then trusting that the man in our life can take care of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it just comes down to communication and learning how to communicate as a man. And one of the things that's helped me over the years, especially in conflict, is like using I statements, like I feel or I felt, instead of like you did this or you did that. Like I think with guys, your buddies or whatever, you can it's easier to make statements like that because there's not as much emotion involved. But when you're dating somebody, there's more emotion. So I've learned that, the minute you try to point the finger at somebody in an emotional conversation, like the conversation is going to go south very, very fast.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, I agree.
Well, Jimmy, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This is a really important conversation, near and dear to me. There's a lot of men struggling right now. I think 80% of the suicides are men, I believe. It's just a super, super sad situation we're in right now.
Yeah, it's over 70% for sure. And I think one of the things that since you brought that up, about half the men I meet have probably thought seriously about ending their own life. And a lot of times guys will be like, dude, reach out to me if you ever need anything, and I'll be there for you. And I was like, guys, let me give you a little secret. No one's reaching out. That's not what they're gonna do in that place because they don't want to be a burden. It's just an extra thing that they have to carry. So you need to reach out to them and don't reach out with answers. Just let them know you care. And so that's part of where, I reach out to 5 people every day is nobody's going to reach out to you. And so just reach out. I wake up every day. I start my day with a prayer. I say, God, lead me to the people that need me. And then I trust if I get a prompting or an instinct, that's God letting me know to do that. And so I listen and I try to always do that if ever I get that prompting.
That's well said, man. It's a beautiful thing that you do. Well, thank you again, man, for coming on the podcast. Where can people find the book? Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about your coaching and stuff like that?
Yeah, if you want to buy either of my books, just go on Amazon, type in Jimmy Rex, and it'll pop them up. B1 is my new book, and it's a lot of what I teach them and a lot of stuff we just talked about right now. And for people that want to, follow me, I post everything that I'm doing through my Instagram page. So Mr. Jimmy Rex on Instagram is definitely the best place to find me. And then my podcast, we're 580 episodes in. It's the Jimmy Rex Show. So I would love to have some new subscribers.
Amazing, brother. Well, thank you again for coming on. Like I said, important conversation, and I think the audience is going to get a lot of value out of this.
Doug, appreciate you, man. Keep doing your thing. I appreciate you.
You got it, man.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.